I took a 7-night cruise with Virgin Voyages, a cruise line that prides themselves on doing things differently. However, I just wasn't prepared for just how different this cruise was going to be to all of the others that I've taken before. Now, this wasn't my first experience of a Virgin Voyages cruise. The first time I was on board one of their ships was back when they launched Valiant Lady out of the UK. I was on a short cruise on that ship. Second, I tried one of their now relatively famous 4-night short cruises from Miami in Florida on board Scarlet Lady, and I've also crossed the Atlantic on Valiant Lady on a longer cruise that took me all the way from Barcelona to Miami. Long story short, I've tried the Virgin product on a warmer weather route and a colder weather route, and I've also tried the Virgin product on a longer itinerary and also a shorter itinerary. But this cruise that I'm going to show you today was totally different to all of them. I boarded the ship in Piraeus, which is the port local to Athens in Greece, before cruising to Split and Dubrovnik, both in Croatia, Kotor in Montenegro, and finally Corfu in Greece. There were 2 sea days on this itinerary, one at the start of the cruise and one at the end. I usually love a cruise that's got a sea day at the start and the end, because you've got time to settle in and enjoy day one on board the ship. You then have a few quite port-intensive days before then finishing off with a relaxing day at sea to recharge before you head home. One of the main reasons that I booked this cruise was because all of these ports were brand new to me. I often find it quite difficult to find a cruise and to find an itinerary, especially in Europe, that takes me to new ports. So I was super excited to head off and see a totally new place every day. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the whole cruise. I'm going to show you my cabin, some of the onboard facilities, the food, and also show you the ports that I visited throughout the week. I'll share with you how much I paid for the cruise, and I'll also offer you my honest views on whether or not I'd take a cruise with Virgin Voyages again, and whether or not I'd cruise to this part of the world again. If you do enjoy this video today, it would be great if you'd consider supporting my channel by clicking both the thumbs up and the subscribe buttons. Both of these massively help me to reach more people with my content and therefore help my channel to grow. So thank you. Before boarding the ship, I opted to fly from the UK to Athens to spend a few days exploring the city. This journey very quickly turned into a bit of a nightmare, so I was thrilled that I had budgeted to spend a few days on land before boarding the ship. I arrived at Heathrow in London at 10 o'clock in the morning for what should have been a really easy short flight across to Athens via Frankfurt in Germany with Lufthansa. But annoyingly, the world had other plans. Due to protester activity at Frankfurt Airport, my flight was completely cancelled and the next available flight was the following evening. To confirm, it was 12 noon and my new flight was the following evening, so I suspected this was going to be a long and relatively painful wait. There's nothing more annoying than standing at a baggage carousel at an airport arrivals hall after not even leaving the airport and not going on holiday. Believe me, everybody around you is happy, they're tanned and they're smiling, and I'm standing there with my cold coffee that I picked up in the departures lounge waiting for my bag to appear. Because of the length of the wait between my original flight and my new flight, Lufthansa, my airline, did actually give me a hotel for the night, so I headed over to Terminal 5 to check in. I reckon I lucked out with this because I was given a room at the Sofitel, which was a lot nicer than a lot of the hotels that I've often opted to stay in before I cruise, so I wasn't disappointed at all. When I walked into the room, there was just one major issue with this hotel room that I'd been given, and that was that it was in London, and I wanted to be in Greece, because at the end of the day, that's where my cruise ship was leaving from in 2 days' time, and that is when I had a complete brainwave. I wondered if I'd be able to switch from Lufthansa to British Airways, who did have a flight to Athens later that night. We'd previously been told that this flight was completely full, but I could only see one logical option, and that was to not unpack into this hotel room, get back to the terminal, and see if I could fly standby. In other words, I would go through the airport like any normal passenger, just without a ticket to get on the plane, and then if someone didn't turn up at the gate, I would get their seat. That might sound a little bit risky, but at the end of the day, I was either going to spend the night in this hotel Or I'd spend the night having a glass of wine at the departures lounge, and worst case scenario, I'd just come back to the hotel anyway. Fast forward a few hours and they let me know at the gate that I'd been allocated a seat, which meant I was flying tonight. I've never made my way down to a plane as fast in all my life. I was completely sure that when I got on board, something would happen, like there would be someone in my seat, or my ticket would fail to beep at the gate. But no, it was all good. I got on the plane and we took off and got to Athens. After a few hours, I arrived at Athens airport and I was able to just get in a taxi and go to my accommodation. I found a really unique accommodation option on Airbnb and I was delighted with it. It's pretty rare that I would choose to book through Airbnb before a cruise. I don't think I've ever tried it before, but I was delighted with what I found this time. It was an apartment, and the whole thing had been designed by the owner, who was a local architect, and it felt much higher quality than what I'd have been able to get in a local hotel. Not only was the inside of the accommodation absolutely beautiful and way better than what I'm used to, but this place even came with its own private terrace, which was drenched in sunlight during the day. It had its own dining area, sun loungers outside, a whirlpool bath out there, and there was also an outdoor shower. I know, fancy for me, isn't it? Now that I was finally in Athens, I was able to spend the next day and a half exploring as much of the city as I could. I'd never embarked a cruise local to this city before, and this was what made this cruise so different to the others that I've ever taken with Virgin. I know, we're already talking about difference number one, and we're not even on the ship yet. Athens is an incredible city. If you've never been, you really should think about adding it to your bucket list. Everything here is just so old. There is history everywhere you look, and it's amazing to just walk through the city and explore everything that this place has got to offer. Anyway, Athens aside, let's head to the port and let's board Resilient Lady. Cruise ships that sail from Athens actually sail from Piraeus, which is about a 40-minute taxi journey away from the city. You can also use a train to travel between Athens and Piraeus, but I opted for the taxi option because I had loads of luggage with me, and to be honest, it was far too hot and I just could not be bothered heaving my bags across a train network. I arrived at the cruise terminal in Piraeus at about 1:30 p.m. and I was absolutely amazed at how quiet it was. Look at this. The way they worked embarkation here was pretty similar to almost every cruise port that I've ever embarked a ship from before. You check in your luggage outside, you then go into the terminal building to complete the main check-in process, and that's where on a Virgin cruise you'll get given your wearable bracelet that you then use that to charge everything on board the ship. And then once that's complete, you head out the other side of the terminal building to board the ship. Because of my loyalty status with Virgin, I had what they call Deep Blue Extras, which allowed me to use the priority check-in line along with all of those who had booked the Rockstar suites on board. Between that and that Airbnb with the bath outside, I felt as though this trip had suddenly taken a turn for the better. Stepping onto this cruise ship felt strangely comfortable and homely. Remember, I've never cruised on this ship before, but I have been on two of her fleet mates, Valiant Lady and Scarlet Lady. As the design of each Virgin ship is so similar to the others, and I mean so similar, even the furniture is basically the same, it's often quite difficult to know which ship you're actually on. I kept thinking if someone just picked me up, told me to close my eyes and dropped me into a venue, I don't think I could have told you if I was on Scarlet, Valiant or Resilient. It was such a strange feeling. I thought this might have made the experience quite boring because of how much I absolutely adore exploring a new cruise ship, but I settled in immediately on this cruise and I instantly knew my way around. One thing that I absolutely love about a Virgin cruise ship is how they scent it. They must be pumping fragrances through the air conditioning system, but it smells exactly the same every time you get on board, regardless of which ship and regardless of what part of the world you're in. I absolutely love it. I've also stayed at Virgin hotels on land and I've noticed exactly the same thing there, so it must be something that Virgin do as a brand. As soon as I got on board, it was straight to the pizza place, which is Virgin's onboard pizzeria on deck 7 of the ship. This place is totally included in your cruise fare, and I just cannot get enough of the pepperoni pizza in here. I probably shouldn't admit how many times I opted to get a pepperoni pizza to then eat in bed at night. However, we don't have to go into that right now. After eating, it was straight to the cabin to see what I'd be calling my home from home this week. I booked the cheapest grade of balcony cabin on board, which Virgin Voyages refer to as a Sea Terrace cabin. You can book a few different types of Sea Terrace cabin on board. You've got an extra large cabin, which is a bit bigger, and then you've got the central Sea Terraces, which are basically midship cabins. The forward or aft Sea Terraces, so those at the front or the back of the ship if you want to specifically pick a location, or they've got what they call a Sea Terrace lock-it-in rate, which is what most other cruise lines would call a guaranteed balcony. That's what I booked this time. In short, this means that the cruise line assigns your cabin to you. You've got no say in where you end up being located. Now, this could have worked in my favour. I could have ended up getting a cabin in the perfect location. However, it didn't. I was allocated cabin 13318Z, which meant that I was in cabin 318 on deck 13 of the ship. Virgin Voyages labels each side of the ship as A or Z to help you find your way around. This cabin was so far forward, and that did make me really quite nervous from a motion point of view. A few of my friends had warned me that I'd really feel the ship rocking from this cabin, but I'll come back and tell you more about that and whether or not I did later in this video. This week, I'd be cruising the Adriatic Sea, which was a whole body of water that I've never been in before, so I really couldn't predict what it was going to be like out there. I found this cabin to be absolutely brilliant. It had everything that I'd need while on board, and it was such a step up from the solo insider cabins that I usually book when I cruise with Virgin. I didn't book one of those cruises this week because I wasn't solo on this trip, and the luxury of being able to split a balcony cabin with someone was brilliant. I'll come back to how much I paid for the cabin and whether or not I felt it was worth it later in the video. The only thing I needed to do in the cabin now was watch the safety video, which I could do on my TV. I'd then need to attend my muster station later on in the day for them to scan my cruise wearable, but that wouldn't happen for a few hours yet. Now that I was on board, and I'd had my first pizza and also checked out my cabin, it was time to think about sailing out of port. I always think Virgin Voyages do such a brilliant job of sail away on the first night of the cruise, especially when the weather's warm and they can really pack out that top deck. There's usually a party up there on deck, and for about a 30-minute window, there's also unlimited free bubbles, which is always a really nice touch. People seem to really enjoy this perk, and most people were standing with a glass or two and then popping back for another few before the time ran out. Some people were really taking advantage of this 30-minute window, and I couldn't help but think, how on earth are they going to keep this momentum and this pace up for the rest of the cruise? Because it's only 5 PM on day one. Sailing out of Piraeus was awesome. We were docked beside a huge Norwegian cruise line ship that I'd never seen before, and so I was able to satisfy my inner ship geek while sipping my fizz and enjoying sail away. Next, let's move to look at each of the ports I visited during this 7-night cruise. The first port on this itinerary was Split in Croatia. This place is the second largest city in Croatia after Zagreb, which is the capital. Waking up this morning reminded me why paying extra for a balcony cabin is sometimes totally worth it. Opening those curtains and seeing the blue skies, the blue waters, and the city across the bay was absolutely amazing. I'm usually the biggest advocate of cruising on the inside of the ship, but waking up this morning, looking out there, was great. I hadn't done a huge amount of research on these ports before taking the cruise, and so I was pretty surprised actually with how hilly it looked. I wasn't expecting to see what looked like mountains all up behind Split. From a cruise ship, it's really easy and totally flat to walk along to the city. You'll find a beautiful marina with a really wide range of boats and yachts berthed there, and you'll find the old city buildings running all along the waterfront. Because this was my first time in Croatia, I opted to book some form of tour rather than try and walk around and explore it all on my own. I used Viator to book a walking tour, and this meant that I then joined a small group of people for a walk around the old town. The guide then took us to all of the main attractions and sites within the city walls. If you'd like to find out more about Viator, you can find a link to their website in the description of this video. I usually find that they're a really good way to explore a city or have an experience with a guide who knows more about what you're seeing, without having to pay the really high prices that cruise lines often will charge. I paid €14 for my tour, which lasted for about 2 hours. My main criticism was that this tour did go into such a deep level of detail. If you've followed me for a while, you'll probably know that I do enjoy history and I do enjoy learning about the ports I go to, but once I reach my cap of new information, especially when it comes to the history of a place, I really struggle to absorb any more. So by the end of this tour, I was ready to slope off and do my own thing. The overall summary of Split that I would give is that this place has got an absolutely fascinating history behind it. It's absolutely gorgeous, and it was a brilliant first stop on this itinerary. Up next was slightly further down the coast, and that was Dubrovnik. Split and Dubrovnik really aren't that far away from each other on a map, but I was so surprised how different they both felt to each other. I was really impressed with what I saw in Split yesterday, but when I got to Dubrovnik, I really felt as though this place was a notch above, and I was absolutely blown away. Now, you do need to take a shuttle bus to take you from the ship along to the city if you visit Dubrovnik, but once you're there, it's absolutely stunning. And it was like something straight out of an episode of Game of Thrones. If you've ever watched Game of Thrones, then you'll know that a lot of that show was actually filmed right here in Dubrovnik. So it's not surprising that it did feel a bit like a filming set at times when you were walking around. To get the most out of my day here, I opted to buy what's called the Dubrovnik Pass before leaving the ship. This is a pass that allows you to access a huge number of attractions across the city, including things like the Rector's Palace, the Maritime Museum, the National History Museum, the Museum of Modern Art. You get the picture. You get a lot for your money with this pass. You also get access to the city walls, which I'll come back to shortly. To buy the pass for the day, it cost me €40. If you're visiting over the winter season, then you'll be able to secure the pass at a much cheaper price. But if you're visiting over the summer season, like I did, then you'll need to be prepared to pay the full price. But in my opinion, completely worth it. Generally, I found Dubrovnik to be much busier than Split, and at times I really did feel it was a bit too busy. I found this to be a growing issue with some cities over the last few years. Tourism seems to be growing at a pace that just creates crowds absolutely everywhere you look. That said, I did notice quite a few one-way systems in place throughout Dubrovnik that weren't active on the day of our cruise call. So I can only imagine how busy this place must be when they have to make the streets one way. My absolute highlight of Dubrovnik has got to be the city walls. The city walls in Dubrovnik, as you see them today, were constructed back in the 13th century. They're 1,940 metres long and they go up and downhill. So you really do need to be prepared for a good walk if you want to walk the length of the walls. As part of the wall's structure, you'll find the main city wall, 16 towers, 3 fortresses, 3 moats, 2 drawbridges, and so many other features. I honestly could explore this place for hours without getting bored. One thing that I would say is that everybody warned me how busy the walls get with tourists in the afternoon, and so they all recommended that I get up there early. However, I got up there about 2:30 in the afternoon, or 2:30, and I found them to be really, really quiet. Now, this might have been because it was so warm, but I'd honestly recommend taking some water, wearing a hat, and going up there in the afternoon if you want to avoid the crowds, which is contrary to what everybody else advised me to do. After walking the length of the city walls, I found what ended up being an absolute gem of a find. I've never been to Turkey, but they have a local delicacy there called burek, which is essentially a pastry snack. In Croatia, you'll find shops, cafes, and street vendors with their own twist on this. The place I found offered cheese, spinach, potato, chicken, or veal. I opted for cheese, and it was so tasty. It gets served to you as a really long, narrow, soft stick, sort of like a churro, but nothing like a churro. I honestly think I'll do the worst job of trying to even explain what this was like. So let's move on. The third port of call on this cruise was Kotor in Montenegro, which very quickly secured a spot as one of my top cruise ports ever. Rather than talk to you about today, I want to leave you to watch what today looked like for me. I got up early in the morning to watch the ship sail into Kotor, which means that you get to see the ship sailing up what is Europe's southernmost fjord, and it is honestly like nothing I've ever seen before. I then, once we were in position, disembarked Resilient Lady using the tenders to go and explore the town itself. After about an hour or so, I then booked a boat trip to go and see the fjord for myself from a totally different view. It's all very well seeing it from the top deck of a cruise ship as you sail in, but honestly, seeing this place from a small boat was something that I will never ever forget. So I'm going to leave you now and let me show you my day in Kotor, Montenegro, and I'll pick back up with you in a few minutes' time.
Our hearts beat to the city streets. We began to feel the fire. We rise like tall buildings as the chemicals, they take us higher. The night's young, it has just begun as she puts her hand in mine. We wanna chase the night, wanna dance to the light, pull the stars from the sky, just two hearts running wild. Never sleep, never stop, as we shout from the top. We're gonna be two hearts running wild. Now the morning is the afternoon. We lay awake in bed. It laughs so loud as the hours pass. We're gonna do it all again. We wanna chase the night, wanna dance to the light, pull the stars from the sky, just two hearts running wild. Never sleep, never stop, as we shout from the top. We're gonna be, we're gonna be two hearts running wild. The moonlight, summer sky, it was the best we ever had. And we'll stay on forever. We'll never have regrets. We wanna chase the night, wanna dance to the light, pull the stars from the sky, just two hearts running wild. Never sleep, never stop, as we shout from the top. We're gonna be two hearts running wild. We're gonna be, we're gonna be two hearts running wild.
Hopefully you've enjoyed seeing what Kotor in Montenegro was like to visit for the day on this cruise. Let's now move on and look at the fourth and final port of call, which was Corfu in Greece, which is the 7th largest Greek island. There were two other ships in port with us today, one from Marella Cruises and the other from MSC Cruises, and so I did suspect it might be quite busy once I got ashore. One point that I should add here is that last night on board was Scarlet Night, which I'll come back to shortly in this video, but I was a little bit worse for wear waking up in Corfu this morning. After leaving the ship, I took the shuttle bus across to the terminal building, and this is where the day got off to such a chaotic start. At least one of the other cruise ships must have been using this port as an embarkation port, which meant the terminal was a nightmare if you were just transiting through. This place felt so disorganised. There was litter everywhere, the bins or trash cans were full, and to top it all off, there was a burst sewage pipe directly in front of the building. So yes, I was worse for wear, and I was now standing outside a cruise terminal that had raw sewage just running across the street. Once out the other side of the terminal, it was another shuttle bus to get into the city. Interestingly, the other cruise lines must have been using these shuttle buses too, because we had Marella Cruises welcome on board paperwork in our bus, which was really weird to see when I wasn't with Marella and I was with Virgin just next door. Once off the bus, I took a walk through the old town, which was really quaint, really pretty, and really nice for a walk. One thing that I really enjoyed about this itinerary was the fact that all of the ports of call were right on the coast. It was so lovely to be able to see clear blue waters from all of the cities that we visited throughout the week. My walk took me through the old town, down the coast, and through some of the little shopping areas and markets. After a while, I gave up and decided to retreat to find a local equivalent to a Fanta Orange, which, if you know me at all, you'll know that that is my number one holiday drink, and I was hoping, to be honest, that it was going to cure me today. Being totally honest, even with my orange Fanta, I just needed to be back on board in the air conditioning. A really busy old town really wasn't doing me any favours today, so I decided to call it quits and head back to the ship. So, that's the ports. Let's now talk about the sea days. As you know, we had a sea day at the start and the end of this cruise, and my cabin was right at the very front of the ship. All week, I was delighted to hardly feel any movement while I was on this cruise ship. I think one of the biggest reasons for this is that the ship was cruising in the Adriatic. If you look at the ports for this cruise on a map, you'll notice that the body of water we were in is, generally speaking, pretty protected by land on each side. I've cruised in way more exposed open waters, and the waves in those areas can be much higher, and therefore the ship rocks much more. So it got me thinking about something that I hadn't really considered, but maybe the Adriatic is perfect if you're a first-time cruiser, or if you're a little bit nervous about experiencing seasickness or motion while you're on board. In terms of onboard activities, I found there was plenty going on during the sea days to keep me occupied. If you've followed me for a while, you'll remember my transatlantic YouTube video where I had 9 sea days between Europe and the US, and to be honest, by the end of that time, I was beginning to feel pretty bored and I kind of wanted off by the time I finally got to Miami. On this cruise though, it was great. I found that by the time I'd had a lazy morning, booked a sit-down brunch somewhere, which, by the way, a top tip is that you have to book the wake for brunch because it is hands down my absolute favourite for that. It would already be the afternoon. On a warm weather itinerary, I'm one to then spend time relaxing out on the open decks or in the warm air out on my balcony. And then before I know it, it's usually time to get ready for dinner. I find the days disappear on a warm itinerary. During the day, I usually find that the Virgin Voyages cruise product is pretty similar to the other cruise lines. It's after the sun goes down and the ship comes to life at night that Virgin really demonstrate how different they are to every other cruise line out there. I made a point of trying to go to as much of the entertainment on board as I could. One thing that was really great for me was that although this wasn't my first Virgin cruise, the person I was travelling with had never been on board this sort of ship before, so it was really interesting to almost see all of the entertainment through fresh eyes all over again. And my general summary is that I think the variety of entertainment on a Virgin cruise is absolutely fantastic. From the pyjama party on the first night of the cruise, where everyone's invited to wear their PJs for a party out on deck, to the performances from the diva, the onboard resident drag artist, there is plenty going on. You could also go to see a theatre show at the Manor, which is the venue that then becomes the ship's nightclub later on. Or maybe you could go and play bingo, hosted by the diva, or maybe you like the sound of Scarlet Night. On that note, let's talk about Scarlet Night on this cruise, because as you know, I've taken multiple Virgin cruises, which therefore means that I've experienced a Scarlet Night on each one. But this one on here, this night of the cruise, was the best I've ever seen. If you're not familiar, Scarlet Night is the main party on board, where they transform the entire ship and create what they call an immersive experience that really is ship-wide. Almost every venue on board changes to fit the theme of Scarlet Night. Even the corridors coming down from the cabins turn red. It really is so cool. In my opinion, it always works better in warmer weather, because then everyone can get outside up on the top deck, rather than everyone crushing into one of the venues downstairs if it's cold or if it's raining outside. One thing that I love about Virgin Voyages as a company is that they really seem to embrace the concept of you do you. Just be yourself, be the best version of yourself, and just have a great time. I genuinely felt this Scarlet Night was such a brilliant example of that, and everyone seemed to get involved, and everyone seemed to be loving it. The party kept going well into the night, which probably does explain my relatively sore head when I woke up in Corfu. One of the top things that people ask me about when they know that I've cruised with Virgin Voyages is the food. The reputation that surrounds Virgin is that it's quite a foodie-friendly ship, and that if you like good, well-presented, quite fancy food in parts, then you're probably going to love a Virgin cruise. This is a topic that I do feel pretty strongly about, because I think that from a variety point of view, the food on Virgin does feel quite lazy, and I really wish more would be done to update the menus and to update the offering. Now, don't worry, if you're new to Virgin, you're not going to be affected here at all. You're probably going to absolutely love the food. However, in all of my Virgin cruises, which have been spread out over a couple of years, I've seen only a handful of menu changes. I find it really weird that I can almost memorise the exact menu in some of the restaurants on board these ships, despite the fact that, in the big picture, I'm not really that loyal a Virgin cruiser. Fine, okay, I've taken a couple of Virgin cruises, but I'm not one of these people that's cruised only with Virgin, or that's cruised 50 times with Virgin. I find it weird that in every restaurant, I basically know what I would order right now if I was to go on the website and book a cruise for next year. I'd love to see Virgin mix up these food menus a bit and bring some fresh flavours and fresh options to the area of dining. It is really positive to see them trying some things. So while I was on board, they were actually running a food and drink festival, and there was an event called the Asian Night Market at Sea, where they transformed the galley, which was the onboard buffet restaurant, into what I guess felt a bit like an Asian food market. I really liked that, but I also felt it was a crying shame that that only took place on 2 nights of the cruise, and all those really different flavours and all those different foods then completely disappeared from the menu altogether. So yeah, it would be great to see Virgin mix it up a bit and make the topic of food a bit more exciting, because the quality is there. I would just love to see more variety. Okay, let's now talk about money. For this 7-night cruise, we paid £1,995 British pounds, which was about $2,500 for 2 people sharing a Sea Terrace cabin. This meant that we'd paid about £1,000 or $1,260 each, which equates to £143 or $180 per person per night. Now remember, with Virgin, you do get some additional things included in the base cruise fare. Things like Wi-Fi or soft drinks or fitness classes are all included, and these might cost you extra if you then cruise with another cruise line. I felt that the price we paid demonstrated really clear value for money. The only slight issue was that we then needed to buy flights from the UK to get to Athens to catch the ship, which over the summer months is quite an expensive route to take. For the two of us, we paid just under £900 for return flights from the UK to Athens, which I guess probably serves as a lesson to everyone to always make sure that before you book a good deal on a cruise, just check how much the flights are before you find yourself getting stung. But anyway, that is my whole 7-night cruise with Virgin Voyages. Would I take another? I think the answer to that is pretty clear. Yes, I am a huge advocate of cruising with Virgin Voyages, and I think it's really refreshing to see what they're bringing to an industry that some could argue has started to get a little bit comfortable. So let's see what Virgin Voyages continue to do over the next couple of years. I, for one, am excited to see where they go, but I'd really hope you've enjoyed this video today. If you have, as I mentioned earlier, it would be great if you would support my channel by clicking both the thumbs up and also the subscribe buttons. If you'd like to join me in another video, of which I have many to show you, then please feel free to come over to my channel where I've got tons of content over there, which I hope you'll find useful. If you'd like to stay on the topic of Virgin Voyages, then why not come and join me over in this video? Here, I'll walk you through some of the things that I loved and also some of the things that I hated about cruising with Virgin. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll hopefully see you over there.